Hey, yo. Hello, people. How's everyone doing? I don't know if anyone noticed, but I pulled it back 1 hour, about an hour and a half ago. It was scheduled for 9:30, and I thought I don't want to get to bed too late again. So it's now starting at 8:30. You may or may not have noticed. How's everyone doing? Kashawn, welcome. You are first in the house, or at least first off the mark. What's going on? It's good to have you here. Let me pin that message. Format today is going to be slightly different because we've done a couple of live streams in a row. This is our third live stream in a row now, because I'm trying to be a bit busier. Find myself with a bit more time on my hands, so I'm trying to be as productive as possible. And welcome all. Got 20 in the house. What's up, Baker Boy? How you doing? We'll see how many more we get in before we get crack-a-lacking. But format of today's one is going to be slightly different. As you can see, I've pinned the StreamYard link for people. Hi, Katrina. For people who want to join the live stream discussion today. It's going to be a watch back of 2 videos that I've done that ultimately are now quite closely related. And that wasn't the original. Well, there was no intention to do that at all, but it's kind of like with what I do, one thing leads to another. You know, one piece of research leads to another piece of enlightenment and another revelation, and each revelation begets another. So it's been quite exciting. But these 2 videos that I'm going to be watching back to back are quite closely related. So I thought it would be nice to actually just have a bit of a watch back with all of you guys together. Most of you, I'm assuming, have seen both of these videos. I'm sure not everyone's seen both of them, but I'm sure most of you have seen both of them. Some of you will have opinions about them. Some of you won't have seen them, but I think together they work quite well for building up a picture. And for really highlighting the significance of what happens to be one of Africa's greatest symbols, and also one of Africa's greatest linchpins of cultural continuity that we have across the continent. Really, really important. African cattle, the Shanga cattle of Africa, it's really like Africa's signature, and it has so much cultural importance and historical importance across the African continent. It's literally quite astounding. So we're going to be diving into these 2 videos today, back to back, looking at African culture, looking at how it relates to the Nile Valley. Wasn't it a different title earlier? I don't think so. Sacred Cattle of, it said Ankh. The thumbnail just says Ankh, and then the video title is The Sacred Cattle of Africa's Nile Valley Watchback. So I think, Jonathan, that was always the title. At least I don't think I've changed it. Reported stolen mentions the cattle stone in Nabta Playa. And that's another reason why I really love doing stuff like this with you guys, because so much of my revelatory work comes from just reading comments and engaging with you guys. I can't tell you how many times that has been the seed for a piece of research that has just ended up blowing my mind, you know. So, you know, I love the feedback that you guys give me, and I love the conversations that we have, because inevitably, if the heart is teachable, there's always something to be learned, you know. Always something to be learned. So yeah, I'm only getting stuff up for the stone circle. There is that buried, I know there's that buried cattle carcass in and around Nabta Playa, so I'm not sure if that's what you meant. But yeah, there's a anyway. We can always discuss more of that together. Let me say a big shout out to the few people that are in the chat. CI Wise said never caught you in a live before. Don't have a lot of time. Sorry, yeah, don't have a lot of time today, but I'll catch this. That Ankh video was one of my favorites piece to the channel. Thank you, appreciate it, and I'm glad that you're here today for however long you're here. I don't envision this is going to be a long one. Wesker's in the house. Proof of evidence. Kishus is in the house. Santos is in the house. Nate's Nan is in the house. Is that 3 videos in a row now? Nate's Nan, you've been doing the long shift with the channel. Appreciate you. Yeah, we're gonna get it in. Okay, we've got 40 in the house. I hope all 40 of you has struck the like button at least once. That would be awesome. And if you have, I think I'll just give another reminder. The link to the live stream is in the chat. Is if you feel like that you're in a position where you want to ask a question or you want to offer some insight, I'm not going to restrict it, but I'm going to say yes, it is the Sanga cattle. All African horned cattle is basically a derivative of the Sanga cattle, to answer the Nile Valley Boys question. Yeah, so what I was going to say, not to exclude anyone, but I would be particularly interested in anyone who is from any of the regions of Africa that have this practice of cattle keeping, or even know of it quite well, where they feel they can provide insight. I'm not positioning myself as a massive expert. I've done very focused research on 2 areas, as you're going to see in these videos, but I'm learning something new every day. In fact, I posted a post when I was in Ghana a couple of weeks ago. I was amazed to see some Sanga cattle being herded through the city in Accra. There was a massive herd, and there was just one little shepherd's boy who was taking them. There must have been at least 150, 200 of these Sanga cattle, horned cattle, in Ghana. And it just really then it kind of struck me how universal a practice this is for the African people. Really wonderful that Africa has its own specific cattle and has its own. Here's the important thing, that Africa has its own tradition of pastoralism, because this is something that they've continually tried to deny us. They've continually tried to insist that Africa inherited pastoralism from somewhere else. But the evidence of Africa having its own oryx and then having its own horned cattle species that aren't found outside of the continent, and those essentially being universal across all pastoralist societies in Africa, proves without a shadow of a doubt that Africa's pastoralism or history of pastoralism is absolutely indigenous. So yeah, really cool, fantastic. All right, so I think that's enough for the niceties and the small talk. I think we should just get into this. It's a watch back, so I'm gonna play it. I will be keeping an eye, probably more of an eye, on the comments that I normally do, because it will allow me to maybe answer questions. I'm not sure how much input I'm going to have because it's my own content, and I don't really have much reaction to give to my own content because I've normally put the information that I needed to be conveyed in the video. So it's not often that I've got anything more to say than what I've already said in the documentary or in the production. So that's kind of how it is, you know. So report stolen. So you're referring back to your Nab Supply. So yes, the burial contained a cattle-shaped stone as well. They moved the entire stone structure and placed a replica in front of the Nubian Museum in Aswan. Wow. That's interesting. I always go a little bit quiet when it comes to the kind of tampering and abuse of quote unquote Nubian and Cushitic civilization, Meroitic. There's always so much skullduggery going on in that area. It just gets me a little bit frustrated. Anyway, Nile Valley Boy says, I noticed that a lot of Nilotic people hold the Sanga cattle in really high regard. Absolutely. Absolutely, the Dinka in particular. I've seen the Rwandans doing a certain dance similar to the pose I see amongst Nilotic pastoralists. Yeah, a lot of the people that you're going to see in this first video, they are of Rwandan persuasion. So a lot of the dances that you're going to see today, the people who are practicing the Amaraba will come on today. A lot of them are Rwandan. So yeah, I totally concur with that. We got a Reiki practitioner in the chat. Greetings from Amsterdam, King. The Black Netherlands salute to you. Yeah, I've got that's I'm quite impressed by that Reiki practitioner there. And Planet Wells, big thank you to you for your wonderful donation. It says grace and power, excellent works, appreciated. Talia, you're also on the third straight day, so yeah, appreciating you here in the chat. All right, 56, let's get started. I think that's enough of the small talk. I'm going to start playing the video. I'll play it for a few seconds.
Pastoralism has been the backbone of many African societies for millennia, shaping economies, social structures, and spiritual traditions.
Give me a 1 if you heard that, please, and I'll run it back. Oh, I'm not getting any ones. Was that? Have I forgot to turn the audio on? Did no one hear that then? Because I haven't got any ones yet in the chat. Oh, no, I got 1. Thank you, Wesker. Okay, there you go. They're all coming in now. Okay, fantastic. Everyone heard it. All right, so I'm going to pull that back and I'm going to let it play. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, and I'll also try and stop it at parts if I've got something relevant to put in, which is a maybe not, I'm not sure. So let's see how it goes. Once again, just a quick reminder again, in the pinned comment is a link to the StreamYard so that you could come and join me. Okay.
Pastoralism has been the backbone of many African societies for millennia, shaping economies, social structures, and spiritual traditions. In pre-dynastic Egypt, during the Nakada period, cattle stood at the heart of life along the Nile Valley. More than just livestock, they were symbols of wealth, status, and survival, a trend that remains intact in pastoral African societies today, forming a sacred thread that connects ancient.
I just paused it there really quickly, just wanted to make a little comment on the heavenly cow and the important role that cattle plays in so much of what is ancient Kemetic and obviously ancient Cushitic culture and throughout Africa, because I was having this discussion actually earlier with a friend of mine, Wesker, who's in the chat at the moment, and I was talking about the fact that African horned cattle have been ignored by a lot of Egyptology, and every time a horned cattle has been depicted, they've always translated it as being a bull. But Africans' cattle, the horns are unisex, they're on both the women and the men. So all of those depictions that have been translated as bull, because we come from a very patriarchal interpretation of Egyptology, are actually unisex depictions, because Africa's cattle are horned whether they're male or female. So all of those depictions of what you've been told are bulls could actually be men, and could actually be representative of male or female. And that's really important to note. We must remember that as we come to this understanding of Shanga cattle within the African continent. We must understand that the male and the female are both horned. Okay, so so we're having what we were looking at as a divinely balanced creature. Okay, and that matches obviously ancient Kemetic divinity as well, in that we look for balance. We don't look for just male representation. We tend to have balance. So it's worth just kind of like bearing that in mind.
and contemporary African cultures.
And as we have said before, all of these we can see, they have names. Each of these cows has a name. This is what actually what makes them unique from other cows in the world. Here, every cow will have a name. This brings the kind of attachment between the farmer, the one who takes care of the cows, and the cows themselves. There is that kind of bond because each of them has a name, which is, I think, it is not common in other breeds of cows or anywhere else in the where they raise cows. Because as I said before, and I have always told you, cows are part of the Banyankole and the Bahima here in Western Uganda. That's why they give each one of them a name, because they are friends. They are friends to the cows, and there is that bond which is always there.
Please do give that channel, Big Nile Wonders, a subscribe. Give it a visit. He's provided me alone with so much information about this subject that I didn't have until I engaged with his videos. So beyond obviously just putting a link in the description, it would be great if he could get some subscriptions out of this and get more visits, because his information really is very, very excellent. So Big Nine Wonders is the name of the channel, and he dedicates to kind of educating people about the pastoralist lifestyle of the Bahima of Western Uganda, and it's definitely worth a look in. Some of them, Ian just asked, do they eat cows? And I'd say it depends on who you come across. Some of them do, or some of the cultures I should say do, and some of them don't. For some of them, they're much more valuable as a source or a statement of wealth than they are worth eating. Many societies, the wealth is measured by the amount of cattle that you have. And I think that was reflected in the Nile Valley as well. So in the Nile Valley, it was much more prestigious to own lots of cattle than to, eat some of them when you get hungry. But I know in other cultures they just eat them, because I've asked exactly the same question.
The Nakada period marked a crucial phase in Egypt's prehistory. Before the rise of the pharaohs, when the society was in the process of formulating the habits that would later embody what we today regard as the greatest civilization in history, the people of the Nile Valley thrived on agriculture and pastoralism. Integral to this culture was the domestication of Africa's unique breed of cattle. These long-horned cows were seen as far more than mere resources. They were respected as companions and revered as emblems of power and prosperity, much as they are today. Excavations at sites like Nabta Playa in the Western Desert reveal the early domestication of the African taurine cattle, or Bos taurus africanus. These cattle were essential to the survival of these communities, many of whom had migrated away from the drying Sahara to the contrasting fertility of the Nile Valley. By the time of the Nakada period, cattle were fully integrated into their economy, depicted in art and celebrated in rituals.
So I'm just going to pause it there and read out this comment over here, which is interesting. So it says, in Sudan, cows are taboo to kill, like in the West. They are valued, like King's Monologue said, in Sudan and South Sudan. It's used as money, and you need cows to marry your wife as dowry. So thank you very much for that wonderful insight there. Just gives us more knowledge as to how, or the role that these animals play across Africa. So that's really valuable. So thank you very much, Swisha Supreme Music. Let's carry on.
This remarkable terracotta figurine, excavated in 1907 from a tomb at El Mamariya in southern Egypt, is one of the oldest objects in the Brooklyn Museum's collection. It portrays a woman with arms raised above her head, her hands pointed inward, in a pose that has puzzled Western academics for decades. Many have speculated about its meaning. Was it a gesture of praise, a depiction of a goddess, or a ritual posture?
Right now we're looking at something called simply female figure. This is really such a mysterious piece, isn't it?
It is, because we know so little about it. It was discovered by the Brooklyn Museum's first excavations in Egypt in 1907, and it is the...
I love this part of this video, by the way. Not patting myself on the back or anything, but I love the fact that as part of what we do, because this part of the video should act as a, you know, as a I was going to say as a kind of like as a rally. Yeah, should rally the troops if you're African. When you see this part of the video, this should really galvanize you to want to do something, because what you see is, despite best efforts being made, the curators and the researchers have no way of deciphering so much of what is depicted in ancient Egypt. They have no way of deciphering it, because to them, Egypt is a dead culture. To them, Kemet is a dead culture. To them, ancient Egyptian or Medu Netta, it was at Wildflowers, actually 9:30, and I rescheduled, sorry. To them, Medu Netta is a dead language. Everything about ancient Kemet is this old thing, this historically aged thing that has been completely decimated 2,000 years ago, and none of it survives. Yet to us, as Africans and as people of African descent, this should really be a rallying call for us, because Africans right now, let me be very, very clear. The Africans in my chat, you were the seed that created this video. I have to be very clear about that. You were the seed that created this video. The knowledge that I can't make this video without people from the region giving me the knowledge, having these conversations with people, noticing things. It's because we respect one another, or if I should say we respect one another enough to listen to the insights that you're provided, you'll start to see and you'll start to recognize things. One of the things that allowed me to recognize this dance is because I was subscribed for a long time to a Instagram channel called Inyambwa. It's now called Inyambwa Troop. And you're going to see them in a moment. And they're a group of Rwandan dancers. And I've been subscribed to them. They're growing really fast now, but I've been subscribed to them since they had under 1,000 followers, I think. They had like barely any. But I loved it because just seeing them and seeing their culture and seeing everything about them, it just reminded me of Kemet so much. It reminded me of the reconstructions I make. So many of the faces that I create, it was in seeing these different kinds of Africans practice their culture from around the continent that I was able to pull features and borrow and see these features naturally sitting in the different various cultures and peoples of Africa. And it was because I had that respect for them and obviously other African cultures, all the kind of channels that I follow, that I was able to start making these links. So that's the kind of, I do want to put that out to everybody who's a part of this, part of this live stream right now, to really put yourself at the forefront. You will find things and share them with me. I'll make a video if you don't want to do it, or I'll do the research, or I'll make a documentary if you don't want to do it. But put yourself out there, look out for it, open your eyes, because the culture is alive in Africa. It's never died, and that's one of the things. That's why I like this scene. Sorry, ran over. I'll let it play now.
Oldest work of Egyptian art in our galleries, and probably the oldest thing in the entire museum.
It's amazing.
It was made about 3500 BC, so it's well over 5,000 years old. And it shows the figure of a woman with her arms stretched out over her head. She's wearing only a white skirt, and her body actually comes to a point at the bottom. I think probably one of the reasons it's my favorite. It's the kind of object we can talk about and speculate endlessly, but we're never really going to know exactly who she was.
Perhaps? Or could the answer be simpler? When we examine the pose closely, a fascinating pattern emerges. The arms appear to curve backward like the horns of the Ankole cow, a breed central to the cultural and spiritual life of Central Africans and early Egyptians. The thumbs point forward.
I did want to just pause it over here because I found it fascinating again, even when you hear the curators talking about it. They never noticed that the palms were facing upwards. They never noticed that the thumbs on both hands had been broken off. So to them, it was just a woman with her hands in the air. The reason, once again, that we are able to, or at least I was able to pick out that the thumbs pointed forward, because once again, I recognized the pose. And when I recognized the pose, I saw the detail. It was then afterwards that I saw the detail of the thumbs being broken off on both hands, meaning that the palms were facing upwards and the hands were upside down. And that really is one of the major keys, because that's what makes the pose unusual. It isn't just the case that a woman is standing with her hands in the air. She's standing with a very specific pose, a very specific and unusual pose that isn't natural to do. In fact, it's actually quite difficult to do. I'm not going to do it because the camera's on, but I encourage you to try and do that pose, and you'll realize it's not as easy as it looks. Some of you won't get any further than having your hands literally horizontal. It takes, probably just takes kind of like a lifetime of doing the dance for it to become a very natural and easy thing to do, like the people who practice the dance regularly do it. Swisher Supreme, I'm going to read your comment again. I like the comment you're leaving at the moment. It said, I showed this sculpture to my girlfriend who is from Dinka tribe in Sudan, and she said it's a figure of a woman dancing a traditional dance in one glance, and these Europeans don't know what it is. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because we are reconnecting with Kemet, there's got to be, someone said a minute ago, said we're just getting started. I don't know who said that. I can't find it at the moment. But the point being, because Africans are now getting reconnected with Kemet, this is going to be like it's going to be like a avalanche. They're not going to be able to stop or control the kind of the rate and the speed of progress that we make in terms of deciphering, uncovering, and making sense of Africa's history. And that's really going to be the key, because they're going to realize, as I think they probably already are realizing, that we are the only ones capable of deciphering ancient Egypt. We are the only ones capable of deciphering the language. We're the only ones capable of deciphering the culture. We're the only ones capable of connecting it. And they'll realize that all these many years, these 200 years of falsification, these long drawn out attempts at trying to separate Africans from their culture along the Nile Valley, it's going to falter, because ultimately they won't be able to stop us from making these connections. And yes, it's spirituality as well.
Meaning the palms face upward and the arms gently curve, mimicking the elegant presentation of taurine horns. This seemingly peculiar and unique pose, however, is not lost to time. In fact, it continues to play a very current and important role amongst population.
I just want to say really quickly, this song is so lit. I think I put the link in the chat, in the description of the video. I'm so into these songs. I'm just gonna pull it back a little bit. Oh man, it's dope. It's dope. I wish someone could translate actually what she's saying in the music, to be honest with you. But yeah, I really love this song. It's so lit.
It's not lost to time. In fact, it continues to play a very current and important role amongst population.
And sorry, I had to pause it again. Forgive me, guys. I like to interrupt. But I have to say this as well. To me, this is the sound of Kemet now. When people play all of those Middle Eastern music, and a lot of people still do it when they're like making their videos and stuff, and they're playing and they're playing all that kind of like I don't know. I don't want to disrespect it, but it's obviously all that kind of like Middle Eastern music. That's not Kemet. Doesn't sound like Kemet. Yeah, Kemet is the harp. Kemet is the kora. Kemet is the drums. To me, this is the sound of Kemet. Kemet is African music. So you guys will know when I do my videos, whenever I do productions, I don't ever play that kind of like Middle Eastern music, because it's like, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's a part of the falsification. That's a part of the deception. When they play that music as a part of, once again, distancing Kemet from Africa. To me, this is what Kemet sounds like. When I hear this music, I hear ancient Egypt. That's just me personally, but you know, obviously each to their own, but that's definitely my preference.
Nations that have maintained their ancestral pastoral traditions. If one observes the cultures of the modern societies that keep the Ankole Watusi breed of cattle, such as in Burundi, Rwanda and Uganda, the exact pose seen in the figurine is expressed in traditional dances. The dance in many ways seems to act as a complementary rite of passage that follows these domesticated African cows, an ancestral feature that unites their keepers. In many African societies, the Sanga cow, Africa's native breed, domesticated by the ancient Egyptians, remains sacred. Its long, graceful horns are celebrated in rituals, dances, and art. The Ankole Watusi variant, for instance, holds significant cultural importance among...
You know what's so amazing as well? I'm sorry, I am going to interrupt because obviously none of you guys are joining the chat, so I've got carte blanche or whatever. But you know what's amazing as well? Like, going back to the comment that was made earlier, regarding the fact that all of these cultures, the Dinka, including right down to South Africa, and then all in between, and probably at the same, if you go toward, I know the Congo have got their own kind of like derivative. They all do this dance, and that's what's really amazing to me, because it's kind of like, well, that raises the question: do they do the dance just because they got the cows and they really revere the cow, or is that all leading back to a shared origin point? Maybe the Nile Valley being the origin point, or maybe the Green Sahara being the origin point. But it does make me think that that's obviously beyond, to me at least, that seems like it's beyond coincidence that they would all share the same dance, as well as obviously having this. It's one thing for the pastoralism to spread, but it's another thing for such specific aspects of the culture to spread, where this is not done outside of Africa. It does kind of like get my, you know, it gets me thinking about where that kind of shared origin point is. Dame Dash, stop trying to disrespect, yeah.
among African communities, particularly in Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi. Among the Bahima of Uganda, these cattle signify prestige and social rank. They are rarely slaughtered for meat.
In Western Uganda, actually this breed of the cows is called the Watusi breed. It is known as a sacred breed of the cows that people take as part of them in their cultural tradition. In the family, sometimes you find that it goes in generations. They are not necessarily for meat. You have cows just for prestige. Some of them, they take, the more cows you have, the more prestige you have, or the more you are respected in the society.
I'm gonna have to put that one on the screen. I'm gonna have to get me some Shanga cattle milk. Wildflower says drinking milk causes the ladies to get that shape. Yeah, okay. Cool. You do realize you should be bottling that and selling it with that line. Use that as your tagline. Yeah. I'm giving you game now here, Wildflower. Yeah. That's your selling line. Yeah. You get this milk, you bottle it, you freeze it or whatever, you start shipping it. Yeah. Start shipping it globally. That, and then remember who put you onto that. Yeah.
Also about the Ankole cows, many people even outside this tribe of the Bahima have started to like it because of the advantages it has over other cows.
The Banyankore people revere them as symbols of abundance, while the popular traditional dances, locally known as Igishakamba, Amaraba or Inyami.
So this is the group that I was telling you about called the Inyamibwa troop. you can find them. Oh, look, the word Inyamubwa is there. So you just put the word troop at the end of that, TROUPE. They have an Instagram that I've been following for some time. And to me, I'm going to be real with you. When it comes to the New Kingdom, I'm going to be quite specific here. New Kingdom of Ancient Kemet, you won't get any closer than Rwanda. That's my opinion. You won't get any closer than Rwanda. New Kingdom specifically. The literal doppelgangers of every single New Kingdom reconstruction I've made can be found in kind of like that Rwanda, Uganda. You can just see it there. I'm telling you, you guys, you'll see if you start looking in that region. But that was one of the reasons I followed as well, because I was like, okay, cool. It helped me a lot in terms of doing what I was doing.
Mibwa mimic the silhouette and graceful movements of these majestic animals. Whilst the origins of the various dances are unknown, the Igishakamba dance is performed during weddings, ceremonies, and important cultural events. Notably, Igishakamba dancers and drummers express communal desires, values, and collective creativity. Dr. Jacques Nzabonimpa, Director of Culture and Research, says that in prehistoric Rwanda, people inhabiting a certain place would have their own style of dancing. He cites Ikinimba of the Bakiga people in the southwestern part of Uganda.
Just a quick one. Why? Who asked that question? That's what you call we call that kind of like Western arrogance or ignorance that's been at play there. So I don't know which one it is, but when Africans are celebrating something and you find the one most negative thing that you could think about in Africa's history as an argument against Africans celebrating, that means you are practicing. I'm going to assume that you're maybe, African or not, or maybe you're just some guys coming to troll. But that's something you need to address. That's a psychological issue you have if you feel the need, whenever someone says something positive about an African nation, to go back in your memory and to think, what's the most negative thing I can think of about that nation, and say it. You have to work on that, because that's a character flaw that you have there. So whoever you are, think about those words.
And Igishakamba of the Bahima. The raised arms of the figurine echo the poses of dancers who honor the cow's beauty and sacredness. Could this be a continuity of reverence spanning nearly 6,000 years? Throughout pre-dynastic Egypt, cattle were central to life and death. Rock carvings and pottery frequently depicted long-horned cattle, symbolizing fertility, strength, and prosperity. In burial practices, cattle bones and figurines were placed in graves as offerings, underscoring their spiritual importance. Ankole cattle are descendants of an ancient breed of cattle that lived in the Nile River Valley around 4000 BC, and are often referred to as the cattle of kings because they appear in Egyptian hieroglyphs. They are known for having the largest and widest horns of any cattle species.
Oh yeah. So on that note, actually, let me give you some joke here. If you want to, I'm not gonna do it, or I might. We'll see. Google Ankole Watusi cattle. Ankole Watusi cattle. If you wanna have some joke, it's hilarious. And look at the Wikipedia page that comes up top when you Google Ankole Watusi cattle and see what. In fact, I'm gonna do it now, because we have to insert some humor. We always have to insert some humor at the ignorance, and this is why we have to learn what we're learning and address what we're addressing, because these people are literally the most toxic people on the planet. Let me show you this, because I know none of you have done this before. Yeah. All right. So let's do this together. All right. Ankole Watusi. Now, I want everyone to laugh with me here, yeah, because Ankole Watusi, yeah. Those are indigenous names, yeah, and I know you guys can see it, yeah. The Ankole Watusi is a modern American breed of domestic cattle. Yeah, American breed of domestic cattle. It derives from the Ankole group of Sanga cattle. Those are all African words. Yeah. Breeds of East and Central Africa. It's characterized by very large horns. So how on earth is it a breed of American cattle? It's not even an American word. Okay. This is exactly what will happen. Okay. Yeah. I see a capital what? Obviously, Americans love what what the Ankole Watusi cattle represents. Obviously, those cowboys probably love the massive horns, and they literally have the biggest horns in the world. Africa's native cattle have got massive horns. They're literally record-breaking horns. Just because Americans started importing them from Africa to America, it doesn't make them American. Look at this. Country of origin, United States of America. Americans haven't crossbred them. All they've done is continued to breed them. They haven't introduced a new species to make the horns longer. All they've done is bred Ankole Watusi with Ankole Watusi. So that means it remains an African breed. Trump will soon change the name of this breed of cattle. What's to stop him? Look what Wikipedia is putting out there. And so for those of you who question me not ever using Wikipedia, and for me, that makes it very clear that Wikipedia is toxic and it's malinformed and it's poisonous and you should avoid it like the plague. You now know why. Okay, you now know why. This is why, because any idiot can come along and say anything they want, such as Ankole Watusi to native words, yeah, are domestic to America. This is how they're crazy. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that, because this is the this is the craziness that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Well, yeah, you wouldn't have believed it unless I showed you.
This cultural legacy persists across Africa. In Rwanda, Uganda, and beyond, the elegance of the Ankole cattle is celebrated through art and dance. These traditions suggest an unbroken thread of cultural continuity that seem to extend throughout Africa's Great Lakes, right up to Egypt's Nile Valley.
Oh yeah, I never showed as well. This dance, in fact, I might even show it in the next video, I'm not sure, but this actual dance that this boy is doing can also be found in the hieroglyphs. It's amazing. And then the dance afterwards
extend throughout Africa's Great Lakes, right up to Egypt's Nile Valley.
That dance as well, that exact dance can be found as well. Exact dance with the head turning and the woman wearing, these are what I've now discovered are headscarves. So these are headscarves that are on the woman's head, and the hands on the hips with the hands turned out. Was this exact dance is still done in that region that I classify as Punt. So there you go. Oh, I've got a visitor. Are you ready to go, visitor? Black Migo. You're gonna need to turn your camera on. I'm not gonna put you on the stage with your camera on, but I want to see who you are before I risk putting you on my live stream. All right, cool. We're good. All right, you can have it on or off. That's fine. Now I'm gonna add you to the stage.
Peace, brother. Long time listener. Pretty good. I appreciate it. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I'm from the United States, and I've always paid attention when you drop the videos about the cow, because it's very interesting. And it's like you say, it's always good to add humor. And the longhorn cow is very, very popular in terms of the American mythos, especially what became like the cowboy culture and what the extension of that from the Southwest, what we call the Southern Rim, basically from California to Florida, from the time of, the first Europeans getting to America, say 500 years ago, up until now. It's a very deep history. But the University of Texas, which is like, college football is big here. The University of Texas are the Longhorns. And I live in Dallas, Texas, and the symbol of Texas is the Longhorn cattle, right? Now, what's very interesting about it, and hopefully you'll end up circling. You seem to have this natural evolution of touching on very, very pertinent topics. So I'll leave you to it. But regarding the cow and the history of the settlement of America and, blacks, the African influence in America and still, especially in Latin America, that came over with the Spanish, like that, the Longhorn cattle is central to that. It has that, like, when you're talking about the first people who settled in Mexico and Texas, where I live in Texas, like a lot of those brothers were the people who came over with Christopher Columbus and the the numerous other Spanish and Iberian conquistadors, as they call them. But the cattle is like central to that. I'm learning a lot about it because I've lived in Mexico for a time. I'm fluent in Spanish, but like the cow culture in Mexico is very big, and it's directly related to the African influence in Mexico that many people don't know about. Like, there's a huge African influence in Mexico, but because of various factors, it's well hidden. But when you research the history of, the cow and how it came to occupy this space in the American and Mexican and Latin American mythos, you see that it's a direct result of the African influence and the influence of Black people who were also, the main body contingent of the settlers that were coming over here. And I just thought, when I saw it, not this video, but you've mentioned this, I guess you're replaying an older video right now. And I think I've seen parts of that one. And so I just always thought that was interesting. But University of Texas, you should look at it. I mean, you probably have already seen it, but the Longhorns, Kevin Durant went there. And, I'm sorry.
Carry on. No, carry on. I want you to finish your point.
Yeah. Kevin Durant, the basketball player, NBA, he went to the University of Texas. If most people know him. But yeah, the University of Texas is, the Longhorns, and you see these cows everywhere, like in the middle of, like, Dallas is a major city here in the United States. And like, you go out here into the suburbs and like in the middle of a neighborhood, they'll have like a field with these, Longhorn cattle, that, just moseying around. But also, I mean, you also make very pertinent, you're giving, the points you're making regarding the Rwandan and Ugandan relation to Egypt. I've always kind of naturally felt that when I looked at the people, because there are a lot of Rwandese here in DFW. And even when I went to school, you can just tell, I mean, just the phenotypes, I guess you could say. But I just wanted to jump on and just make that comment about the cows. And man, you should do you've probably talked about, I think with Trill Black, I think you've mentioned it before about the African influence in the pre-Columbian civilizations here in America. That's something I've always been interested in. And that's a big debate online among Black people here in America.
I'll be going into that, definitely.
Yeah, man, I would love to hear that, man. It's and the Egyptian connection is also very, very prominent. And it's a lot of folks. I'm sure you've already started doing the research on the background. So like, if you ever go to like New England, I spent a lot of time in New England, and in that area, the Indian tribes have their languages and the names of the people themselves. They have a very, very comedic just sound to them. You hear a lot of ket. There's a lot of ket on the end of words, and it's just very, very interesting, man. So, man, just keep doing your thing, man. I'm listening. Like I said, I'm here in the States. I think you're in Britain, right?
Yeah, I'm in London.
Okay, good deal, man. Well, shit, you're worldwide, so just keep doing it, man. I'm tuning in.
Did you notice the way I said I'm from London? Quick correction, yeah. It's a weird thing, yeah, because when you're Black, yeah, and you're from England, yeah, a Black person from England is never English.
Really?
You never see
Okay.
a black guy who goes, "Oh yeah, I'm English." Never. You never say
Right.
that. They'll say what
Okay,
city
good
they're
deal.
from.
It's funny.
You
I
know?
got cousins. I do have cousins in London, man. It's funny. I have cousins
They'll
in
never say
London.
they're English. They'll say what city they're from. So I'll be
Okay,
like, "Yeah,
yeah.
no, I'm from London." You know, because like, yeah, I'm black, but I'm not English. I'll never
Right.
be. It's
Well,
weird
so
things.
let me ask you this. So were you born and raised in London?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a quick question if I hang up.
Yeah.
So like, so when I look at like the Black British, well, the Black British population, I guess if that's correct,
Yeah.
like obviously there's a huge immigrant contingent. Like even the lingo of the hood in Britain is very very Caribbean and African. So like are there any like Black people who like for us we can go back a couple of 100 years
Yeah.
before there was any real immigration. Like is there any like a Black contingent among the Black population in Britain, in London or wherever, that traces back, 300 or 400 years, as opposed to being first or second generation immigrants? I've always was interested in that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so first of all, when it comes to London, even with London now is the Black communities in London, even the ones who came on that kind of post Windrush, which is kind of like 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, those ones who came then, they're now like fourth generation. Like my kids are third. Yeah, my kids are third generation Black British, so you're looking at fourth, sometimes fifth generations. But to answer your question, for 99% no, but I am convinced there are Black populations in Britain and in London who are historically Black and English, or historically Black, but they're very hush hush about it. I know for certain there's populations in Scotland, because I'm in contact with them, trying to get something going on the channel. So there's Black populations in Scotland who are historically Black, who can't trace their lineage anywhere else. But I'm also convinced there are Black families in England as well, but they're very, very hush hush about it. And some of them are really well. Some of them are well to do. Some of them ended up in politics as well. So there's a bit of that going on here, but it's one of those things where you have to keep it quiet, because this is a part of England's history that they're not, well, only now because you've got channels like mine and stuff like that, but they're not wanting to release that part of British history, because for the longest time, Black people have felt Black people don't belong in this place. This is a white island and we were all brought here from Africa and the Caribbean. But obviously history is now revealing that this place was very, very Black before the Anglo-Saxons landed and shifted the dynamics of it. And some of that is traceable. So there's work to do, put it that way. But there are some. Very good question though. And I was gonna say, when you started talking, I was going to say, literally, when you were about 20 or 30 seconds in, I'm sold already. As soon as you was like, oh, actually, the cattle that's here, they were brought here probably by Africans. They've been here for a long time. And that Black people, I was already sold, because actually I was online the other day and I was talking about, I already knew the history about the cowboys being Black. So if someone was a cowboy, they were Black. And that history has been stolen by the kind of spaghetti Western movies who kind of showed you all these white cowboys, but cowboy was a Black profession. And actually I saw a elderly Black guy breaking it down. He was like, no, cowboys were all Black, because cowboy was actually a derogatory statement they used to throw out to Black people. Because as a white man, you were a cow man. Yeah, I said they used to say you a cowboy. It was a disrespect.
Cattleman,
so, obviously,
cattleman is what they call in Texas. Yep.
Cattleman. So, but the Black people, they used to say you're a cowboy. Yeah, it was kind of like, how they say boy. So this guy was breaking it down, and obviously, just like we do with everything, we wear. Black people in America, they wore it like a badge of honor, made it cool. And what happens with everything that Black people make cool? They appropriate it, and they say, "Oh no, that was us. We're the cowboys." Do you know what I mean? So as soon as you started talking, and we're like, "Oh, that cattle probably was brought over by Africans some time ago, and they've kind of bred them and kept them up," I was like, "I'm sold. I'm sold already.
It's
So
so
all you
funny
have now,
because
you've created a whole nother line of research that I have to go
yeah,
down.
and once you get into the like I said, I've lived in Mexico. I speak Spanish, and I mean Texas is just Mexico basically still, especially when you get down around San Antonio on the border. But like you should also kind of, and I'll let you go on this point because I want you to get back to your original content. But the Sahelian influence, the population of Sahelian male black men from the Sahel who were part of the contingent of, I guess, that Moorish contingent that went into the Iberian Peninsula all those years ago, they influence the population of Mexico to the point of being nearly 50% of the maternal haplogroups. And the Mexicans are just, I'll send you, I'll have to get I'm sure you have your Gmail and stuff on there, but I'll start sending you some research that the Mexicans are starting to find out about their own population. But it also, like I said, is tied to this longhorn cow. And it's just crazy because they're saying that the first ranchers in Mexico were all of African descent. And the reason being is because the cows that were brought over were all longhorn cattle. And that's why, like I said, that's why it became such a part of the mythos. But it's funny that how it ties the people. Like you're talking about the dance at the Rwandese, which I was always wondering what that dance has. It had something to do with something from the first time I saw it years ago. But you're tying that and then showing figurines from Egypt doing the same, in the same stance. And then you can take that across the Atlantic and take the cow, one of God's creatures, and then relate it to how our influence was exerted as well. So it's all interesting, brother, man. Just keep doing your thing, man. I'm gonna let you go and I'm gonna keep listening, man.
Nah, blessings, and thank you for joining, man. That was very interesting. And
yes, sir, brother.
Give me some food for thought. So yeah, let's see where that line of research goes.
We'll
Swisher,
do. Brother.
Yeah, please, man. Swisher Supreme, you're online. Shall I unmute you? Go ahead.
Hey, yo. I just wanted to.
How you doing?
I just wanted to kind of elaborate on the east to west thing because you were trying to say that the tribes all over Africa are kind of doing the same type of dances and cultural practices, right? So what I found is that because I'm from Sudan, right? I'm in Canada right now, but I'm from Sudan, and I've been doing a lot of history on my culture too. And what I found is that there's the Eastern Sudanic region, but there's also the Western Sudanic region, which went from all the way from Sudan, modern day Sudan, all the way to Senegal.
Yep.
So that's another connection that I was kind of seeing, and also with the Wolof tribes in Senegal, they also like to say that they trace their lineage to Egypt, which is interesting because when the Wolof tribe, I guess their king was named Wool, and in Sudan, that's a Dinka name, Wool, and Dang, and those are very prominent names like Andrew or those type of English names would be. So Wool is a very famous name in Sudan. I have many cousins named Wool, actually. So I was just seeing that same type of connection with the east side to the west side. So there's been a lot of because I did see maps of old Sudan that did go all the way from the east to the west and even up into the north with what the other brother was saying with the Arabian Peninsula, with the Moors coming in and conquering over there too. So I just wanted to kind of connect those dots and kind of talk about that as well.
Yeah,
I did have something interesting to say because I am from Canada, and people that do migrate from Sudan that usually come to North America, the most of us we actually go to places where there's a high density of cowboys. So like places in like Calgary, Alberta is known for many cattle herders, and it's a kind of cowboy state or province. And then in Dallas, Texas, there's also a huge Sudanese population over there. And one thing that was also running in our culture, we kind of talk about it. It always is like, yeah, Sudanese love our cows, so we're always close to the cows and the cattle. So it's interesting to point that out as well.
Now that is very, very interesting. It's amazing how much like the pastoralist culture, like I just didn't know how widespread it was across Africa, and obviously Sudanese are some of the definitely the oldest to practice it. I did want to ask you a question about because in the next video I talk about, in fact I might wait till we get there because it talks about the naming conventions, and I've got a question. I guess the question I'm going to put on the shelf is if there is a relation between Dinka and Soninka, or Dinka and Soninke, in terms of the ink part or the Ankh part. But I guess we'll wait for the next video for that, because I'd love to get your feedback. You might not know the answer, but because you already drawn the link between the Senegalese and the Western Sudanese, it would just be interesting to know if there is a link going there, you know.
Yeah.
You can come on to that. Let's get through to the end of this video so we can start the second one, and then we'll carry on the chat. Well, thank you for that input. It was very valuable.
Linking Egypt's
Thank you to the Gift of Knowledge for the generous $20 donation. She writes, as a nurse, I have to catch the replay. Just letting you know, I fully support and love what you do. Gotta go later. Thank you very much, Gift of Knowledge. I appreciate you and I appreciate your gift. And I'm sorry that you weren't able to catch it live, but you'll catch this in the replay and hopefully hear my gratitude.
Dynastic art to its pastoral culture allows us to understand the female figurine of Elma Maria as more than just an artifact. It is perhaps a snapshot in time, a still captured as testament to a vibrant African tradition. It potentially bridges the distant past with the living cultures of today, reminding us of the deep connections we have with those ancient communities. It ties together the very earliest evidence of life in the Nile Valley and the very present contemporary pastoralist communities of the modern day. For several millennia, Africa's unique long-horned cattle have been a symbol of life, strength, and beauty. And perhaps by carving this elegant figure into clay, they left evidence that they too celebrated and honored these magnificent beasts through dance. Either way, they have left us a legacy that has endured as a timeless reminder that even 6,000 years ago, our traditions were not so different.
Thank you. I have to say that I really love that end part of the video, just kind of like showing the pose in its full grace. I mean, just a really important thing. Obviously, the music, by the way, doesn't match the visual right now. I kind of I think I stole that audio from a group called Thunder Music, who are Zulu. I think they're Christian, a Zulu Christian group, but you know me, I'm just abusing social media. By stealing my music from anything that's a social media post, because I know it's legal, but I do put links in so people can kind of listen to it themselves. But that one's from a band called Thunder Music. Well, I love the fact that on this video, these women have shown the wholeness of the Bahima culture by actually dancing in front of the cows. Do you know how easy that made it for me to make this video? It's like I could have just played this video and shown the statue and then just been done with it. So just like a big up to those people who are out there celebrating African culture, putting it, it's so important that we record it, we bang it on wax, we do what we can to preserve our cultures. Like people said, there's people out there trying to erase our history, erase our present. And if we don't practice these cultures, even these women with their outfits, by the way, yeah, this is me going on another one, yeah, these women with their very Roman statue outfits, yeah, these outfits that these women are wearing, these are what you see on the statues, yeah, throughout Europe. And I want you to put a big question mark as to why that is the case and why there's no European women that are dressed like this. And yet all of these women are dressed like the Statue of Liberty. I want you to put that question mark, yeah, and ask yourself, why is it that African cultures seem to be carrying over a lot of these things? But anyway, that's another thing. I don't want to go too left with that. Okay. And yeah, someone said, can we bring back togas? Bring them back. I just think you need to go to Ghana, my friend. They haven't gone anywhere. Togas have not gone anywhere. Yeah. But yeah, so that's let's move to the next video, because that's the end of that one, and we can move on to the next one. So
thank you for joining me on the King's.
Let's hit the second one now. Before I go to the next one, let me just have a quick scan through the chat. We shouldn't be shy to wear our garbs. That's absolutely true. And please, obviously, as much as obviously areas and cultures will develop, that's why actually, this is a bit of a side note, I actually really hope, and I know it will be the case, but I just want to send my energy out there. These nations that are having their kind of revival, you know, like the Niger, is it Mali and Burkina Faso, these nations that are having their kind of like I would say political, but it's not really political there, but they're having their kind of like renaissance, and they're taking over there and they're taking back their nation. I hope they find a way of really elevating African culture, because I feel like that's going to be one of the most important things that these nations do, is not to forget who they are and try and be too clean cut, but to actually really elevate the ancient and the old African cultures, elevate the African way of life, elevate the thing that makes us different. I think that really is going to be key. I need to have time. I need to have access to some of these nations that are really hitting this pivotal time. I would love to get into their education systems and have discussions with them about taking the nations forward and really elevating Africa's status, because they are really at a pivotal point. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, don't be punching above your station, but hey, that's where my mind is at the moment, you know. Let's start the new one, by the way. I've gone into the next video now.
Is the word...
Sorry, and this is really important. I'm just going to put Joy's comment on the screen because I agree with it. They also need to write their own history books. I think that needs to be the first thing that needs to be done. They need to pick up all of that Western education and burn it. All of that Western education and burn it. And then they can get all of their history and all of their education from the remnants. I mean, Mali shouldn't be getting their education from anywhere but the Timbuktu manuscripts. They need to take all of that Western education, burn it, start from scratch, and start talking to African scholars to rebuild it from the ground up.
But Ankh actually pronounced Ankh.
And how is the concept of life indelibly linked to this sacred African cattle? Let's explore. Now, before we go on, let's clarify something. The Ankh is a cow.
Or at least it's very likely.
In as much as people believe it's a dead concept, this word is alive and well and actually lives and breathes throughout the continent of Africa, from the Great Lakes region down to Southern Africa and right up to the Sudan region. And if I'm right about Soninke, which I think someone else mentioned before, then we can also include right across the Sahel to and right across the Western Sahara. So that would be really interesting as well.
Symbol believed by experts to represent the concept of life in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs has presented a puzzle to Egyptologists for centuries, who have been unable to unravel the secrets of its origin.
Now, there have been those that have postulated that the Ankh symbol itself could be a sandal strap.
Similarly, its physical resemblance to a key, or even the analemma of the sun, although providing some objective resemblance, provides little or no cultural or linguistic support.
Now, it's important to pause there to say these ones that I mentioned aren't the only conclusions that have been made. There's also been conclusions made that the Ankh could be the spinal cord of the cattle, I've heard, and other things, and I've heard all of that, and I'm fine with that. The purpose of this video was not to create polemic arguments against what people think the Ankh currently is. It was to present the evidence for why I believe the Ankh is a representation of the cow, but not more importantly, what the cow represents. Now, I'll be doing a follow-up video very soon, maybe even this week, where I'll be focusing in on the ancient Egyptian language, Medu Neta, and how it worked. How actually in the ancient Egyptian language, trying to translate words one-to-one from English to ancient Egyptian is an impossibility, because the words in ancient Egyptian language, the words of the Medu Neta, are conceptual. Each word is a concept. Each word conveyed an idea, not just one-for-one translation. It is not a linear binary language like the ones that we learn in terms of like English and stuff like that. It's a completely different language in the way it's constructed. So when the Ankh being representative of the cow or of cattle is communicating its importance as a concept. We've already spent the first video understanding how central cattle are to the lives and the cultures of the people of most of Africa, to be totally honest with you, but many ethnicities throughout Africa. Now, this video should add to that, because based on the last video, we should be able to understand why they would convey the concept of, and it's not just life, because everyone goes, oh, well, the Ankh means life. Life is the English word, okay? That English word that means one thing is lacking, okay? So I would actually argue the Ankh doesn't mean life. The Ankh is a concept that encircles many concepts, life being one of them. But it's not a one-to-one translation. Ankh equals life. No, that's not how the ancient Egyptian language worked. The ancient Egyptian language wasn't sitting around waiting for English to come along, so you could then take their words and then slot them into a single English word. The ancient Egyptian language was conceptual, and the amount of ideas conveyed by the Ankh symbol goes way beyond that simple one word that we call life. And that's what's really important. I will go into this more in a separate video, but I just wanted to kind of like touch on that. I'm not trying to disprove anyone else's theories about what the Ankh is, but I think this is the strongest argument for what the Ankh is. I'll kind of let it go on from there.
Just speculation. Ironically, this puzzle could have been solved almost as quickly as the word was deciphered, if those studying the sacred language of Kemet had dared to attempt to connect the ancient script to the sacred lands bordering it today. The lands credited by ancient historians with the birth of Egypt itself, being the Upper Nile and the Great Lakes region of Africa.
And just to point out, remember the conversation that we had yesterday when I was going over that Luke Cavan's video, the what race were the ancient Egyptians, but I gave you that diagram and I showed you the Nile and how long that river is, because a lot of people don't understand how the Nile encapsulates most of the African continent. It's it's an incredibly long river, and it's an African river. It carries so much African culture. It's just really important just to remember that the Nile isn't this small thing that runs through Egypt. Everyone thinks the Nile, Egypt, Nile, Egypt. No, Egypt's part of the Nile is less than 20% of the Nile. Okay, the rest of the Nile exists in central and southern eastern Africa. It is a humongous river. So we must bear that in mind.
For there, the word itself, or very close derivations of the word, are used to describe the most sacred animal in Egyptian history. That animal is the cow.
As I said before, and I have always told you, cows are part of the Banyankole and the Bahima here in Western Uganda. That's why they give each one of them a name, because they are friends. They are friends to the cows, and there is that bond which is always there.
More specifically, Africa's long-horned variant, which remains as sacred today in Central Africa as it was in yesteryear's ancient Egypt, probably extending back for thousands of years, since at least to the pre-dynastic era. This pre-dynastic artifact provides early evidence for the Ankh's evolution from a cattle silhouette. Named the Gerza Palette, This stele depicts one of the earliest known depictions of Ankole cattle in the now familiar symmetrical front-facing format. It was created contemporaneously to some of the earliest known inscriptions of the Ankh. It gives us an early glimpse into all of the elements linked to what would become or may have already been utilized in the ancient Egyptians' rapidly evolving written script.
The Ankh itself is represented by this symbol, and this symbol is now quite synonymous with ancient Egypt itself. When people think of ancient Egypt, they think of the Ankh. In fact, and someone actually messaged me earlier about the this is a symbology that we see quite often with the Ankh, where it's being touched to the lips of someone, and that's quite significant. Figuring out why, because this has been one of the big mysteries as to why would they touch it to the lips. Now I'm gonna go on. I'm not going to try and explain that now. I am going to give you some of my theories about this when I do my other video, which is coming very soon, like I said, maybe this week, where we're going to go kind of deep into the metaphysical layer of the ancient Egyptian language, and why we have to approach it as a conceptual language as opposed to a linear word-for-word language like it's treated currently in Egyptology, which greatly simplifies it and makes people miss the meaning of what's being conveyed in some of the kind of like hieroglyph bas reliefs, etc. But I want everyone to, well, if you want to, just bear that in mind, the touching of the Ankh to the lips. Have your thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat. What do you think that represents when the Ankh is touched to the lips? Because that's a very, very repeating practice that we see right across ancient Khmer artwork. So why do you think they got the Ankh and they would touch it to the lips of people? Yeah, answers in the chat, I guess. The Ankh itself is so iconic, it even went on to inspire the revision of local religious symbology, without mentioning any names. I think you know one. Now, actually, on that point there, I did have someone challenge me and say that the cross didn't come from the Ankh. Now, I was always under the impression that it did, but I'm not one of these people who's very hard-headed. But here is my thoughts. Yeah, and by the way, the cross evolving from the Ankh, I believe that was basically a result of the Ankh being present, because the cult, they say the cult, I'm just going to call it the cult of Isis because that's what it was known as, prior to the expansion of Christianity by the Romans, when Romans took Christianity on as kind of like the state religion, and then it spread to most of Europe. Prior to that, what you had was I'm going to say cult of Isis, but you essentially had the Kemetic gods being worshipped throughout most of Europe. That's the Black Madonna that you see everywhere. The Black Madonna was turned from Oset and Osar, that is, Isis and Osiris, into Mary and Jesus. So that's the whole reason the Roman Catholics even came up with this concept of Mary, Holy Mary, even though Mary's a relatively insignificant character in the Bible. They needed to replace that image of the Black Madonna, that Black Mother, that Black deity that was all across the temples all across Europe. And rather than kind of scrap and start from scratch, they just used the existing imagery and said, no, this isn't Oset and Osir, this is Mary and Jesus. Now, they also had the symbology of the Ankh to deal with, which this is conjecture, but less conjecture in Egypt, but more conjecture kind of globally. If the Ankh was a symbology that came hand in hand with the cult of Oset, the cult of Oset, or the cult of Isis, whatever you want to call it, if the Ankh was a symbology, then they would need to have replaced it with something close to it. And this is when you have the conversion of Christ being killed on a stake to being killed on a cross. All of those emblems could have been easily swapped from being Ankhs to being crosses. Now, that a lot of that is speculative, okay? this is some of it, obviously the cult, you know, the Black Madonna isn't, but the conversion of the Ankh to the cross is speculative, but to me that's always made sense. That being said, I'm happy to be corrected if people want to tell me that that is not the evolution of the cross. I'm happy with that, but I'm just gonna put out there what my kind of line of thinking is. And I did even say in this video it could have inspired. It certainly wasn't. I wasn't putting forward a fact there, just to be clear to everyone who's watching this. Of local religious symbology, without mentioning any names, I think you know what I'm talking about there. However, if you compare the Ankh to the Ankole Watusi cattle, I'm sure you can see that the similarity is striking, and that's not the only correlation that they have.
For as you can see, the Ankh is an almost perfect representation of Africa.
And I'm actually going to pause it here as well, because I learned something very interesting. And there's probably people in the chat who can confirm this for me, but I learned that the practice in a lot of cultures, I think particularly in the Behemoth culture, is to tie those, see the way those horns are almost touching and sometimes they overlap, they're tied artificially. So one of the practices of these cultures is to tie the horns so they create a loop. So those horns aren't actually born, or they're not actually born for their horns to do that. They tie the horns to make the loop. So they basically create an Ankh out of the cow's head. Now that's, I haven't mentioned that fact in this video because I learned that afterwards, but yeah, the tying of the horns to form that loop, as you can see on the screen, that's an artificial practice. You'll see in the next, when the video plays, in the next video, you'll see some of them have very clearly overlapping horns. So they've created literally an Ankh. Now that, to me, that has to be a practice from Kemet, or at least that has to be a practice that Kemet basically introduced or were influenced by. It's one or the other. But tying the horns to form a loop to make the cow's head look like an Ankh, I think that's something significant in my opinion. And they still do it because, you know, this is Africa.
Africa's unique long-horned cattle, which is not coincidentally called the Ankole Watusi cattle.
Have a look at these ones. Look how their horns are literally forming almost perfect circles, and that's a local practice. I thought that was fascinating. Now, in the Medu Neter, or the ancient Egyptian language, the word Ankh itself is formed really using two phonetics, but if you want to talk strictly, using three symbols. First of all, we have the Ankh symbol, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Then we have this water symbol, which symbolizes the phonetic for the sound N. And then we had this symbol, which is simply called the AA001 symbol. And this symbol represents the K sound, or the K sound, or the K sound, or the G sound. But either which way, it's a sound that comes really from the back of the throat. So we have Ankh, or Ankh, or Ankh. Now there is an assumed kind of opening glottal stop, which is why we have the word Ankh. Now, what's even more interesting is that the phonetic connected with this bovine head is the sound R. In fact, this bovine head, if you've seen one of my earlier videos, is where we get our letter A from, because in Phoenician, this was turned upside down and produced the A sound, and then it was flipped over again by the Greeks, who made it the letter A. Type a 1 in the chat if you've seen my now relatively old video about the alphabet and where all the letters were derived from and how they all come from Kemet. Please feel free to put a type of 1 in the chat if you've seen that. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because this was one of the first things I actually learnt about the Medu Neter language, going through the kind of the work of Budge, and this head, which is basically a bovine head. It has been called an ox's head as well, but that's because they're just unfamiliar with the Sangha cattle. It's clearly a Sangha cattle. This gives the sound ah, and as I mentioned there, when you have many, if you have like a if you have a symbol or an animal or even a shape in the Meduneta language, and it's just given off a singular phonetic sound, like a, you know, k or e or or something like that, then normally what the case is that is the starting sound of an entire word. So by giving you basically the head of the cattle, it's saying we just want the start of that entire word. And that's what the logic here was, that we have and if you ask anyone who does, you know, who studies ancient Egyptian language, we don't know why it's There's a few letters in the ancient Egyptian where we don't know why. For instance, I think it's the, which one is it? Is it the, I think it's the P, the door, but we don't know what the word in ancient Kemetic for door was. We just know that the P sound, which is a door, which gives us the P sound. We know from that the word door must have begun with a P, but we haven't got any clues in the ancient Egyptian language as to what that word for door was that began with a P. So we just have that one P sound. So this is the same case, or at least I'd say it was the case for this sound. And I think that the fact that the cow, or if the cow was called the Ankh, then it solves that mystery. So I did just want to kind of explain how that worked. If you know the rule behind the way ancient Egyptian phonetics work, is that the symbol being represented, the word begun with that sound. We didn't know, or at least there wasn't really much knowledge about where the ancient Egyptian word for cattle came from. We have one word, which is iwuha, which really represents livestock as an entire concept. Het or heta, hata, hathor, where we get the word hathor from. But neither of these correspond with the sound. However, if we think about the languages up the Nile, which have preserved the word Ankh for cattle, then it makes sense why this bovine head gave us the sound and makes sense that the Ankh is in fact a representation of cattle. And thinking about that, if that is the case, then that means our letter A in the modern English alphabet comes from the Ankh. Isn't that mind-blowing? I was going to do a short about that. If this is true, we don't know for certain this is true, but if this is true, that means our letter A in the modern alphabet comes from the Ankh, because we had A for Ankh. The Phoenicians used the Phoenicians' cattle was called Aleph, which is the where they created the upside down A symbol, and then the Greeks called it Alpha and turned it upside down again. So this basically is a cattle's head. An A is a cattle's head upside down. And if this is correct, the word or letter A comes from the Ankh symbol. Isn't that a really long, convoluted, but also really interesting fact, if that happens to be true?
Whether historical linguists assume that the ancient Egyptian language is now long dead, or they simply believe Central Africa has no link to Kemet, they, for one reason or another, ignore the many examples of this word, which has retained both utterance and meaning deep within the continent.
Well, for some reason or another, historical linguists haven't looked towards Central Africa as a way to uncover the meanings of the word Ankh. And if they did simply look in that direction, they would have found several words that correspond very directly with the word Ankh. What you'll find as you travel south of Egypt or up the Nile is that you'll come into contact with Africa's indigenous form of cattle called the Sanga cattle, also known as Bos taurus africanus. Now, this indigenous breed in Africa is renowned for its long horns. And what you'll find is that this cattle within the African continent, particularly amongst the Central African populations who speak a form of Proto-Bantu, or the Southern African populations, and even up to the Dinka, is that they'll all be called the same name, some kind of derivation of the word Ankh. We can start off with Ugandan Luo and Ankole languages, who have the word Diank to describe cattle. We can also look towards Rwanda, which has the word Inca. By the way, when I was doing this research, I almost fell off my chair at how easy it was to do. Literally, I couldn't believe how well preserved. Anyone who does historical linguists knows that it's actually really hard to find this kind of universal correspondence. It's really, really, really hard. Like, it's really difficult because normally words go through so many kind of like mini evolutionary shifts and changes. I'm actually convinced that the word anta, or ente, and derivations of that, I think that's linked to Ankh as well. But that's normally what happens, where you get little shifts of single letters here, there. But when it came to this particular word Ankh, it's just there. It's just there. And that's really, I found this wild because this was like incredibly easy to do, which and by the way, big up Wildflower, who's in the chat, because she helped me with some of this research, and anyone else who kind of like helped me, I appreciate it. But it wasn't that hard to describe cattle. We also have Nkukombo, the word Ngombe, to describe cattle, whereas in Lugandan, the word Ngombe describes the horns of the cattle specifically. Just further south amongst the Zulu, we have the word Nkomo to describe cattle.
In addition to this, in Sudan, the Dinka and the Shilluk call their cattle Myan, whereas the Bari of Sudan call theirs Inkari.
So you can see that all of these languages have preserved that unk combination for the description of their cattle. In addition to this, we also have the ethnicity of the Bahima, who are also called the Ankole or the Ankore people. They've actually preserved the word Ankh in their name, and they're not unique in this. If we travel just south of modern Egypt itself, we come across the Dinka people, the Inca people, and they are known pastoralists and have been for as long as their history extends back. So if we look, we have people who have kept the word Ankh, and that's why I was going to throw that question mark out there as well to sorry, I've forgotten your name. The guy who was in the on the call earlier with me, the Sudanese guy. I was going to throw the question out to you about Soninke, if anyone from Wolof knows what the word Soninke means, and if it has any link to cattle, or if there's any kind of like pastoralist origin to the Soninke people, because I just have a feeling that the Inke means something, but I'll need someone to jump in and let me know. But I wouldn't be surprised. It just feels like too much of a coincidence. I wouldn't be surprised if Soninke has the same cattle link, but I'll wait till I get some feedback on that. A derivation of it as a part of their endonym, as a description for themselves as a people, or have simply preserved the word Ankh in the naming of their cattle.
In short, it is no accident that the Ankh looks exactly like the beautiful Ankole Watusi cow, solving not only the origin of the symbol, but the true meaning of the Ankh itself. The Ankh, which was tied to the concept of life, seemed to represent the whole bovine, which made sense since, as a pastoral society, every aspect of sustenance, community, and daily life was linked to this majestic beast. More than just sources of food and labor, they were symbols of power, wealth, and divine influence, deeply woven into the social and cultural fabric of the Nile Valley ecosystem.
Now, making the link between the Ankh and cattle in Africa actually provides a perfect explanation as to why the Ankh was a representation of life. Most people who study the Medunetta will know the intimate relationship between the bovine, or even parts of the bovine, and the language itself. But tying cattle to the concept of life, the entire cattle, makes perfect sense. They were very much a part of daily life in ancient Kemet as they are in modern African societies. These Ankole Watusi cow, these horn cattle, these beautiful, majestic beasts are revered, and they're looked towards with a great deal of respect. They are interwoven very much into the culture, as you would have seen if you saw my previous video, showing that even the Igishakamba or the Amaraba dances that are performed today in the Bahima region, to this very day, continue to show that reverence towards the cattle. The practice of pastoralism and cattle domestication within African societies is very much interwoven into the social fabric of Nile Valley civilizations and the Great Lakes region. So it makes perfect sense that they would have taken this cattle that very much was a symbol of who they are as a people and used it to represent the concept of life.
Understanding this also solves the puzzle as to why the taurine head is associated with the phonetic R sound. Once again, by connecting the wider continent of Africa to these ancient Egyptian mysteries, we are able to enrich our understanding of the Kemetic culture and connect the distant past to the present.
Please do not forget, soundtrack is lit as well. I'm sure you guys could hear that. Yeah, boy. I get to listen to some tunes when I'm making these videos, I'm telling you. So there you go. That's the 2 videos. I told you it wasn't going to be a long stream today, although we did still manage to go for an hour and a half. That's cool. But I just wanted to play those, I think, because to me they have some really good value, and I think they belong together. And there's actually a part 3 and a part 4. I feel like this whole cattle theme is going to keep going. That American link is a real curveball, but I was going to do a video very soon on They Came Before Columbus, just kind of like I was going to kind of do a reaction to Van Sertima's research into the Americas, because I feel a lot of that is being swept under the carpet. And to me, there's just a lot of, once again, I look for logic, and there's a lot of logical links between the native population of America, historically pre-Columbian, and not just Africans, but people who were phenotypically black, and that includes Polynesians, Melanesians, and a lot of the populations that was said to have migrated from the Asia Pacific, who were historically black. So it made sense that they landed in America black as well. So we'll kind of try and link those all up and have a bit of a discussion about it and just see what the most logical outcome is. Once again, I'm not here to force or convince anyone, but I am here to kind of like, you know, let's explore all avenues, and let's not allow the mainstream narrative that we've been sold to be all that we consider. So I appreciate everyone who's come on the live. I especially appreciate those of you who have been in the chat, those of you who have been given some really good feedback, those of you who came on the call and provided us with some really solid conversation and information, those of you who are enriching each other right now in the chat with extra information, because I think we all learn from it. And please, when you're online, hit that live chat, because that's preserved forever, although sometimes it takes a long time to show up when you're looking back at replays. But hit the live chat up, because yeah, the comments in there are preserved, so it's definitely worthwhile having a look in there. Ukechukwu will come round to the black you know who's. I don't like saying that word, but you've got an Igbo name, so I have a feeling that you know who they are historically as well, but we'll come on to that as well. But yeah, let's call it a day there. Thank you, and thank you. KW says thank you for such a fantastic and informative live. My absolute pleasure. I thank you for joining me, and I thank everyone who joined me, and big thank you to Drager 001 for the $5 donation. It says send in 5 tariff tickets to help the algorithm. Thank you very much. Your tariff tickets are very helpful, and I appreciate it. So yeah, I think we'll wrap up there. Yeah, we had a good one, and I appreciate the positive feedback. I'm just going back, making sure I haven't missed any gifts. I don't think so. I kept a good eye on the chat today, and you guys actually were surprisingly like attentive, which means you probably found the content interesting, which is good. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Thank you very much, and I'll see you probably very soon. Peace.